The wind screamed across the frozen wasteland like a wounded animal. Damon Reed pulled his thermal hood tighter, squinting through the white chaos that had swallowed the world whole. 3 years on this ice ball of a planet, and he still wasn't used to the storms. They came fast, vicious, and without mercy. He shouldn't have been out here. His scanner had picked up a distress beacon 2 kilometers north of his cabin, probably from a crashed transport or abandoned cargo pod. Easy salvage, good credits. But the storm had rolled in faster than forecasted, and now he was fighting his way through snow that felt like frozen needles against any exposed skin. Damon's boots crunched through the ice crust, each step deliberate. The salvage business was lonely work, but he preferred it that way. No crew meant no betrayals, no complications. Just him, his equipment, and the endless white silence of this frozen corner of the galaxy. The beacon signal grew stronger. He was close. That's when he saw the tracks. They were small, barely visible under the fresh snowfall. Delicate impressions, too light to be human. Damon crouched, his gloved hand hovering over the nearest print. Whatever made these was tiny, and judging by the irregular spacing, it was struggling. His chest tightened. The distress beacon wasn't from cargo. It was from someone alive. Damn it, he muttered, abandoning the careful pace he'd maintained. He followed the tracks, his breath coming harder as he pushed through deeper drifts. The temperature was dropping fast. -40 and falling. Nothing survived long in this. The tracks led toward a cluster of ice formations, twisted spires that looked like frozen claws reaching for the gray sky. Damon's scanner beeped frantically. The beacon was right ahead. Then he saw her. She was barely a shadow against the white. A small figure collapsed at the base of an ice spire. Damon's heart lurched. He ran the last few meters, nearly slipping on the ice, and dropped to his knees beside her. A child. Alien, but unmistakably a child. Her skin was ice blue, shot through with delicate crystalline patterns that caught what little light filtered through the storm. Her small body was curled tight, arms wrapped around herself, but she wasn't moving. Frost had formed her dark hair, and her lips had turned a deep purple gray. No. Damon stripped off his outer glove, pressing his fingers to her throat. There, faint but present, a pulse. Slow, too slow, but alive. He didn't think. He shed his heavy thermal coat and wrapped her in it, pulling her small body against his chest. She weighed almost nothing. Through his layers, he could feel how cold she was, like holding ice that somehow still breathed. The cabin was 15 minutes away at a dead run. Damon had never run faster in his life. His muscles screamed. His lungs burned with frozen air. The wind tried to knock him down with every step, but he held the child tighter, sheltering her from the worst of it. He could feel her heart beating against him, that fragile flutter that meant she was still fighting. When his cabin finally emerged from the white chaos, Damon nearly sobbed with relief. He kicked the door open, stumbled inside, and went straight to the thermal mat near his heating unit. He laid her down gently, his hands shaking as he activated the emergency warming sequence. The cabin came alive with heat. Damon worked quickly, stripping away her frozen outer garments, wrapping her in every thermal blanket he owned. He rubbed her arms and legs, trying to restore circulation without causing damage to potentially frost-bitten tissue. "Come on, little one," he whispered. "Stay with me?" Her eyelids flickered. Damon held his breath. Slowly, painfully slowly, her eyes opened. They were the color of fresh ice on a clear day, brilliant and crystalline. They stared at him without comprehension, wide with confusion and fear. "Hey," Damon said softly, keeping his voice low and calm. "You're safe. You're inside now. You're going to be okay." She tried to speak, but only a soft wheeze came out. Her lips moved, forming words in a language Damon didn't recognize. The universal translator on his wrist picked up fragments, but the dialect was too obscure, too ancient. He reached for his medical kit, pulling out a warming gel pack. As he activated it and gently placed it on her chest, she flinched, those ice-blue eyes tracking his every movement like a frightened animal. "I know you can't understand me," Damon said, sitting back to give her space. "But I promise I'm not going to hurt you. I found you in the storm. You were dying." She watched him in silence, her small hands gripping the edge of the blanket. Now that color was returning to her face, he could see the delicate beauty of her features. The crystalline patterns on her skin seemed to pulse faintly with her heartbeat. Catching the light from his heating unit, Damon pointed to himself. "Damon," he said clearly. He tapped his chest. "Damon." She blinked, those crystal eyes studying him with an intensity that seemed far too old for her small face. He pointed to her, raising his eyebrows in question. For a long moment, she didn't respond. Then, in a voice like wind chimes in a frozen breeze, she whispered a single word. "Nira?" Damon smiled. "Nira, that's beautiful." She didn't smile back. Instead, she pulled the blankets tighter around herself and shifted away from him, her eyes never leaving his face. The message was clear. She might be in his shelter, accepting his warmth, but trust would take much longer. Outside, the storm continued its assault. Damon moved to the window, watching the white fury beyond. Who was she? Where had she come from? And the question that worried him most, who would leave a child alone in a storm like this? He glanced back at Nira. She had curled into a tight ball on the thermal mat, still watching him with those wary, crystalline eyes. Her small body trembled, though whether from lingering cold or fear, he couldn't tell. Damon grabbed a protein bar and a bottle of water, setting them on the floor within her reach. Then he moved to his bunk on the opposite side of the cabin, giving her as much space as the small room allowed. "Get some rest," he said gently. "Tomorrow we'll figure this out." He lay back, exhausted, but kept his eyes on her. After several minutes, when she thought he wasn't looking, her small hand reached out and grabbed the protein bar. She ate it quickly, desperately, like someone who hadn't eaten in days. Damon's jaw tightened. Someone had done this deliberately. Someone had left this child to die. As sleep finally claimed him. One thought burned clear in his mind. Whoever they were, they'd have to go through him to finish the job. Across the room. Nira finished the water and lay back down, her crystalline patterns dimming as exhaustion overtook fear. For the first time in 6 days, she closed her eyes in warmth instead of cold. Outside, the storm began to fade, and high above the frozen clouds, a tracking satellite adjusted its orbit. Its sensors locked on the small cabin below. Someone knew exactly where Nira was. Someone was coming. The morning arrived without fanfare, just a gradual lightening of the gray sky beyond the cabin's frosted windows. Damon woke to silence, the kind of deep quiet that only came after a storm had exhausted itself. For a moment, he'd forgotten about his unexpected guest. But then he saw the small bundle of blankets on the thermal mat, and everything came rushing back. Nira was awake, sitting up with the blankets wrapped around her shoulders like a cocoon. She watched him with those unsettling crystal eyes, completely still, barely breathing, like she was trying to make herself invisible. "Morning," Damon said softly, keeping his movements slow as he sat up. "How are you feeling?" She didn't answer. He hadn't expected her to. He moved to his small kitchen area, deliberately keeping his back to her to seem less threatening. As he prepared a simple breakfast of heated grain porridge and reconstituted fruit, he could feel her gaze boring into his spine. When he turned with 2 bowls, she tensed, ready to bolt despite having nowhere to go. Damon set 1 bowl on the floor near her, then retreated to his small table with the other. He ate slowly, pretending not to watch as she eventually reached for the bowl. She ate like yesterday, quick and desperate, her eyes darting between the food and him, as if expecting him to snatch it away. "Nobody's going to take it from you," he murmured. When she finished, she surprised him by speaking. The words were halting, broken, filtered through what must have been a basic language implant. "Why ... help? Nira?" Damon set down his spoon. "Because you needed help. That's reason enough. And IRA ... marked." She pulled back the blanket slightly, revealing her shoulder. There, among the natural crystalline patterns of her skin, was something different. A darker marking, deliberately made. It looked like a brand, geometric and cruel. "Marked," she repeated, her voice heavy with shame. "Bad, wrong, Nira. Thrown away." The words hit Damon like a physical blow. "Your people did this? They left you in the storm on purpose?" She nodded, then quickly looked away, as if even admitting it brought fresh pain. Before Damon could respond, his perimeter alarm shrieked to life. Someone was approaching the cabin. Fast. He grabbed his plasma rifle from beside the door, checking the charge. "Stay down," he ordered Nira, who'd already pressed herself against the wall. Trembling through the window, he could see a figure moving through the snow. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with purpose. Not the cautious approach of a hunter or soldier. This was someone who knew exactly where they were going. Damon positioned himself by the door, weapon ready. "Stop right there," he called out. "Identify yourself." The figure stopped 10 meters from the cabin. Slowly, deliberately, hands were raised to remove the thermal hood. The man beneath was crystalline. Like Nira, his skin bore the same ice-blue hue and crystalline patterns, though his were more pronounced, more mature. His features were sharp, handsome in an otherworldly way, and his eyes were the same brilliant crystal shade. But unlike Nira, there was no mark on his visible skin. "My name is Tavik," the man called out, his voice accented but clear. "I'm looking for my sister. I know she's inside." Damon's grip on the rifle didn't waver. "If you're here to take her back to the people who tried to kill her, you can turn around now." "I'm not here to take her back," Tavik said, and there was genuine pain in his voice. "I'm here because I've been searching for her for 7 days. I'm here because I defied our elders, our laws, our entire way of life to find her. I'm here because she's my sister, and I won't let her die alone in the ice." Behind Damon, there was a small gasp. He glanced back to see Nira standing, blankets fallen away, her hand pressed to her mouth. "Tavik?" she whispered. The man's stern expression crumbled. "Nira, thank the frozen stars, you're alive." Damon lowered his weapon slightly. "You have 1 minute to convince me you're not a threat." Tavik nodded, understanding. "Our people, the Crystallians, we have old laws, ancient beliefs. When a child is born with certain marks, certain genetic variations, they're deemed ... flawed. The elders say these children carry instability, that they'll bring disaster. So they're exiled during the first great storm of their 8th year, left to survive or die by their own strength." "That's barbaric," Damon said flatly. "Yes," Tavik agreed without hesitation. "It is. I've thought so since I was old enough to understand it. But our society is old, rigid. Tradition is everything. To question it is to mark yourself as an outsider. But you questioned it anyway. When they took Nira, when I watched them carry my baby sister out into the storm ... Tavik's voice broke. "I couldn't. I wouldn't. That night, I stole a transport and tracking equipment. I've been following her emergency beacon ever since, staying just far enough behind that the elders wouldn't detect me." Nira had moved closer, her small hand gripping Damon's arm. She was trembling, but not from fear now. From hope. Tavik came. "For Nira?" Tavik's eyes glistened. "Of course I came for you. I'll always come for you." Damon studied the man for a long moment, weighing the sincerity in his voice against the very real danger he could represent. Finally, he stepped aside. "Come inside, slowly. Any sudden moves, and you'll regret it." Tavik entered the cabin with careful, measured steps. The moment he was fully inside, Nira ran to him, throwing her small arms around his waist. Tavik dropped to his knees, wrapping her in an embrace so tight it looked like he might never let go. "I'm sorry," he whispered into her hair, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry I couldn't stop them. I tried, Nira. I argued with the elders for hours. I begged our parents. But the law was absolute. Parents ... agreed?" Nira's voice was small, broken. Tavik pulled back, cupping her face in his hands. "They're bound by tradition. They believe it's the only way. But I don't. I never will. You're not flawed, Nira. You're perfect exactly as you are." Damon watched the reunion. Something tight forming in his chest. Family. The word felt foreign to him after so many years alone. But seeing these two together, seeing the fierce love between them, reminded him of what he'd left behind on Earth. He secured the door and set his rifle aside. "We need to talk about what happens next. If your elders are looking for her—" "They're not," Tavik interrupted. "In their minds, she's already gone. Dead or survived, it doesn't matter. Once a child is exiled, they're erased from records. No one will officially come looking, but unofficially." Tavik's expression darkened. "That's the problem. There are ... others, scavengers who track the exile drops. They wait for children like Nira to either die or survive just long enough. Then they take them. Take them where? Flesh markets, research facilities, places that pay well for crystalline children with genetic anomalies. The marks that our people fear, others find valuable." Damon felt rage building in his gut. How long until they come? They may already be here. The storm would have slowed them, but the perimeter alarm shrieked again. This time, multiple contacts. Tavik's face went pale. "They're here." Damon grabbed his rifle, checking the charge. 60%. Not great. How many usually come? Teams of 3 or 4. They're efficient, professional. Through the window, Damon counted 5 figures approaching in tactical formation. They wore environmental suits marked with no identifying symbols, carrying weapons that looked military grade. "We can't fight them," Tavik said urgently. "Not head-on. I'm open to suggestions." Tavik moved to the window, assessing the situation with a practiced eye. "There's a service tunnel network beneath these outposts. Old mining infrastructure. Do you have access?" Damon nodded. "There's a hatch in my storage room. I use it for emergency supplies. That's our way out." "And then what?" "We can't run forever." Tavik looked at Nira, who had pressed herself between them, her small hands clutching both their arms. "No, but we can run long enough to reach the neutral settlement at Frost Harbor. It's 3 days north. They don't allow slavers or bounty hunters. If we can get Nira there, register her as a refugee, she'll be protected by coalition law." A voice boomed from outside, amplified by a speaker. "Occupants of the structure, we've detected an unregistered crystalline juvenile inside. Surrender the child, and you will not be harmed." Damon looked at Nira's terrified face, then at Tavik's determined expression. He thought about the easy life he'd had before yesterday. Quiet, simple, safe. Then he thought about this small girl, marked and abandoned by her own people, hunted by slavers, clinging to life and the fragile hope that someone might actually give a damn. "Storage room," he said, making his choice. Now they moved quickly. Damon grabbed emergency packs, while Tavik helped Nira down through the hatch. The tunnel below was dark, carved from ice and stone, barely tall enough to stand in. Where does it lead? Tavik asked. Splits into 3 branches. One goes to an abandoned mining station 2 kilometers east. We can get supplies there, maybe a vehicle. Above them, something heavy slammed against the cabin door. Go, Damon urged, dropping down last and sealing the hatch. He activated a small charge he'd placed for exactly this kind of emergency. Not enough to hurt anyone, but enough to collapse the storage room entrance behind them. It would buy them time. They ran through the darkness, Damon's headlamp cutting through the black. Nira kept pace surprisingly well, her small legs pumping. Tavik's hand holding hers tight. Behind them, muffled by tons of ice and rock. They heard the explosion. They didn't stop running until they reached the mining station 30 minutes later. Damon's lungs burned, and even Tavik looked winded. Only Nira seemed relatively unfazed, though her crystalline patterns were glowing faintly in the darkness. Is she supposed to do that? Damon asked, pointing to the glow.tavik, smiled despite their situation. It's her gift, the thing they fear. She produces light in darkness, warmth in cold. Our people see it as instability, but really, she's just more alive than the rest of us. Nira looked up at her brother, then at Damon. In the darkness of the tunnel, her glow grew brighter, casting their faces in soft blue light. She smiled, small and tentative, but real. Safe? She asked hopefully. Damon checked his scanner. No pursuit signals yet. For now. But we need to move. Frost Harbor is 3 days away, and those hunters won't give up easily. Tavik found an old snow rover in the station, still functional. As they loaded supplies, he turned to Damon. You didn't have to do this. You could have given her up, stayed safe. Damon secured the last pack. Yeah, I could have. But then I'd have to live with myself. And honestly, I've been alone long enough. Maybe it's time I tried giving a damn about someone else again. Nira climbed into the rover, still glowing softly. She looked between the 2 men, her protectors, and whispered something in her own language. What did she say? Damon asked. Tavik single quotes S expression softened. She said, "Thank you for teaching me that not all hearts are frozen," as they drove out into the wasteland, heading north toward hope and safety. None of them noticed the small tracking device that had attached itself to the rover's undercarriage. The hunt was far from over, but for the first time in her short life, Nira wasn't facing it alone.